Will the clerk please call the roll?
Seeger. Ress.
Here.
McGinnis. Here. Willie. Doherty.
Here.
Barcelona. Fitzmaurice.
Here.
Crawford.
Here.
Smale.
Here.
Randolph.
Here.
Truxillo.
Got a quorum?
I believe so. Chairman, we have a quorum.
All right, good deal. Public announcements, please silence all phones and electronic devices. There's no appeals. Speaker cards, if you wish to speak, there's speaker cards over on the railing to my right. Please complete one and turn it in to staff and they'll get it up here to me. Public speaking, 10 minutes each side, 5 minutes for rebuttal. Please exit the building after your case is heard. That's not necessary. Public hearing, presentation from Mr. Ross Liner, Director of Planning and Development, and Askura Robinson regarding the comprehensive plan for St. Tammany Parish government. The presentation will be limited to the comprehensive plan update activities in 2022. Good evening, sir. Mr. Ross Liner.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having us early this evening. We have Matt Rufo from Askura Robinson here to give us an update on the activities, the comprehensive plan update, New Directions 2040. And you'll be seeing Matt over the next 2 months as well, in April and May. And he'll go over that in his presentation. But again, just we're coming to hopefully the closing months on the comprehensive plan. So we expect to have some steering committee members here in April as well as in May. And hopefully get good support from the public. We've been having the public comment period open now for about 5 weeks or so, gotten some good feedback. And of course, I've been in the community for about the past year and a half as well. So just looking forward to Matt's update. Y'all have questions, maybe kind of just hold them to the end, make notes. You know, we'll have the crowd here. You know, if they want to ask some questions as well, that'll be fine. So again, I'll leave it to Matt unless anyone has any questions for me at this point.
I don't see anybody in the queue, so we're going to let you off the hook for a few minutes.
Thank you, sir. Yes, well, not soon enough.
Turn me on.
Okay.
Why don't you repeat what you just told me about the role of the commission in this plan?
Sure.
Versus the role of the council?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm sure it might be in Matt's presentation. I actually haven't seen it yet, but the parish charter states the planning commission shall adopt the comprehensive plan for St. Tammany Parish. So as the role of the planning commission, that is under your purview. It does not give such authority to the council. However, if the planning commission would like to ask the council maybe to, you know, have a resolution, maybe supporting the comprehensive plan, that's probably, you know, reasonable. But at this point, the way our charter's currently written, yeah, it's the purview of the planning commission. It works well for staff as your, you know, let's call it advisors or your research and analysis staff members. So we provide all this research analysis y'all need in y'all packets for all of the zoning and planning commission meetings. So we're the ones who are actively using the comprehensive plan on a daily basis. So it's really good that the administration and at this point, the planning commission, to be the ones who are, you know, really actively using the comprehensive plan in our daily roles. So that's the reason why we're here tonight. That's what we need to do. The last comprehensive plan was adopted, you know, probably 20 years ago. So we're about at least a minimum 10 years overdue, based on the rate of growth of this parish. And, you know, we hope to more than likely need an update in about 5 years. So a parish that is developing and is this dynamic probably should be updated about every 5 years. We'll have a lot of implementation tasks within this comprehensive plan. I'm sure you've all kind of read through them and, you know, hopefully given us some good feedback. So I'll also state, Matt is our consultant. Matt is your consultant. So as you're going through tonight, the next month, you know, please feel free to reach out to Matt, copy me, but, you know, get with them, make sure everybody is, you know, fully understanding what this comprehensive plan does, you know, why we need it, how we will use it, and look forward to everybody's feedback moving forward.
When you said the last plan was it adopted by the council as well as the commission?
I don't believe it was adopted by the council, no.
Okay.
So, and
You're
again,
talking about 2025?
correct.
I would think that it had been adopted.
By resolution. So Matt,
Not adopted by ordinance, it's not
Correct.
law.
by resolution.
Okay.
So I guess it depends on what the definition of adopted was just now. But like I had stated, if the commission wants to ask the council to adopt or, support a resolution in support of the comprehensive plan, I think that's very reasonable. But to adopt by ordinance is not recommended.
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, Matt.
Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners. Good to see you all. Hope you had a great Mardi Gras. And yeah, we'll dive into some citations of revised statutes to get really into the weeds on that question because it's a very good question. Just want to bring you up to speed on where we are in the process. I don't know if I know some of y'all were here on the evening of January 26th when we presented the draft plan to the parish council in this very room. We had really great attendance. We had about 40, I'd say, individuals in the crowd. Received a number of different comment cards. That kicked off our 2-month comment period. We had set it to be a 30-day comment period, but we're getting a lot of feedback, and we heard a lot of interest and a lot of concerns that people wanted to make sure everyone had a chance to fully digest the document and give meaningful commentary. And so we extended the comment period to April 1st. But we want to keep this update meeting today on the calendar in order to keep you fully informed of what's going on. But that would mean that the schedule then is for us to have for you a revised version of the plan at the next commission meeting to present as an introduction. And then for consideration for a vote in May. And so that's what we're preparing to deliver to y'all in time for then, is that revised plan. A lot of this is background, but I do want to go through it in case anyone's missed it, but I won't spend too much time on the background. But just again, what a comprehensive plan is. It's a community's foundational policy document. It covers the full geographic area of unincorporated St. Tammany Parish. It does not cover cities that have their own land use plans and planning commissions like Slidell, Covington, and so forth. It provides the factual basis for decision-making around land use in order to reduce arbitrary decision-making for the long term, up to 20 years. It should be informed by and accessible for all members of a community, and so not a document in which you need a land use attorney to interpret for you, whereas zoning, of course, is much more detailed, as we know. And it's to be formally adopted by a local legislative body. That's national kind of standards in the state of Louisiana. However, there's revised statutes, 33, section 109, in state law states that parish has the ability to, or a parish or municipal planning commission can adopt a master plan, and then when considering any local laws, ordinances, or regulations should be considered. The plan should be considered for any adoption of laws. And so even though it's not itself a local law, it is a document against which planning department staff can evaluate different proposed projects and other decisions. Ross mentioned the Parish's Code of Ordinances, which states right up front in section 104, the parish shall prepare, enact, enforce, and maintain comprehensive plans for the development of the parish. The director has the ability to direct and be responsible for the preparation and maintenance of this plan. The Planning Commission has the power and duty to adopt a master or comprehensive plan. And the Zoning Commission has the power and duty to adopt a comprehensive plan. So it's very clear in the code that the Planning Commission has the role of both adopting and maintaining and enforcing the comprehensive plan. We sought a lot of public input. We've received over 1,000 public comments over the course of the planning process. We've held over 50 individual key stakeholder interviews, sought best practices recommended by the American Planning Association, built on previously adopted plans, including the previous comprehensive plan, the current hazard mitigation plan, and the current economic development plan from St. Tammany Corporation. We've been consulting closely with a 21-member appointed steering committee and also relying on a lot of most best available data regarding recent economic, demographic, and ecological trends. Offer credit and appreciation to Mr. Doherty for serving as co-chair of our steering committee here, including one appointee from each council member and 7 appointees from the parish president. Just want to review some of the big takeaways from the public involvement we've done. This was a pretty, I think, representative question, asking folks what are your priorities and asking folks to rank them and tell us which is the most important to them when it comes to public investments. And number 1 was improvements to drainage infrastructure, followed by investments or expansion of recreation, education, and cultural facilities, maintenance and improvement of sewerage and drinking water infrastructure and current development, constructing connector roads to create a more connected east-west and north-south network of major roadways to relieve congestion. Again, expansion of capacity of existing roads and intersections and protection from coastal flooding and storm surge in low-lying areas. So a really strong emphasis on really fundamental infrastructure systems that protect the quality of life. So I mentioned flood data, ecological data that we've been looking. We used 2017 Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority projections. That's the state coastal master plan projections for likely flood inundation from a 1 in 100 year storm in 25 years. And this map shows you flood depths, and we use this data to directly inform tools such as the future land use map, which I'm about to present to you. Of course, looking at demographic data, where has population grown the most over the last 20 years? You can see there's been over 200%, nearly 300% increase in these communities on the far western end of the parish. But really all across the parish, there are very few areas that haven't gained in population over the last 20 years. And so when looking at projections, we looked at the rate of growth and how that's changed over time. I'll draw your attention to these blue vertical bars at the bottom of the graph here. That's how much the population grew in the 20 years or the 10 years leading up to that decade. So you can see you had the greatest population growth here between 1990 and 2000. Between 2000 and 2010, you had a smaller gain, and an even smaller gain between 2010 and 2020. So the rate of growth has actually been declining, and so we used that declining growth rate to make projections and looked at about 35,000 new residents to be expected at a moderate growth rate or a moderate projection over the next 20 years. This is the unincorporated parish population. The full parish population, including all the cities, closer to about 260,000 right now. But outside of all the cities, in just unincorporated St. Tammany, we're about 206,000 as of 2020. And expect that to grow to about 242, give or take a few thousand. So what's in the comprehensive plan? Has everyone seen the comprehensive plan in some form? I know some of you definitely have. Okay, great. Just a high-level overview. We explained the role of the comprehensive plan, kind of like I did for you tonight already, how the plan was made, the process we went through, documenting all of the different ways the public had a chance to participate, and provided some history and context of land use planning in St. Tammany Parish, including how the parish charter kind of governs the role of the comp plan and the use of the comp plan, because we think that's really important to establish. It's followed by a vision statement with a set of guiding principles against which to evaluate all of the different strategies throughout the plan, and the number of different goals, policies, and strategies that serve as guidance to not just the planning department, but to parish agencies across the board, because the comprehensive plan, again, it's not going to be entirely implemented by one department or agency. It's a parish-wide plan. It covers a lot of different topics. It's going to involve the cooperation of a lot of different entities. But the 5 different categories are land use and development, which we'll focus on tonight, since it's what you focus on mostly. Mobility, transportation, and utilities, living with nature, these are environmental goals and strategies, people and communities, and business and economy. I mentioned the draft vision statement and set of principles, but the draft statement is that in 2040, St. Tammany Parish is a safe, thriving, and healthy community. Residents take pride in the parish's good governance, beautifully preserved natural environment, resilient transportation network, and growing businesses, where everyone has the opportunity to enjoy an exceptional quality of life. Louisiana and surrounding Gulf Coast communities view St. Tammany as a leader in sustainable growth and living with water. And 5 overall principles support this vision. 1, fostering a culture of excellent governance by building trusting relationships. 2, our land use and development should be efficient and sustainable. 3, our infrastructure networks should be connected, reliable, and resilient to safely and efficiently move water, people, freight, and other services. 4, our uniquely beautiful natural environment and resources should be protected through vigorous stewardship and sensitive development. And 5, people from all corners of the parish should have the opportunity to live healthy and prosperous lives. So at the end of the day, the idea behind these principles is that whatever strategy or policy or decision that's being made should be considered on how well they achieve each of these and employ each of these 5 principles. The plan is organized into 5 elements, as I mentioned. Every element, which is a chapter of the plan dedicated to a major theme or subject, includes a number of different goals. Goals are statements of desired outcomes. And within each of those goals, there are a number of strategies detailed. And those strategies are specific methods for achieving those goals. And so you can see on this graphic right here how the plan is organized in that hierarchical way. I'm going to review the land use and development goals, strategies, and policies. I'm not going to read through every single goal and policy and strategy that's in the draft right now, but I do want to highlight some pretty important ones. So under the first goal, which is all about making processes fair, transparent, and accessible, the number 1 strategy here is updating the development code to better explain the appropriate permitted uses under different zoning districts. We understand and heard over and over again that it's very complicated. There are so many categories. There are uses out there that are relatively new that haven't even been defined or included in the development code, and so that is priority number 1 coming out of this plan. And that is the major implementing ordinance of a comprehensive plan, of this comprehensive plan. It's what brings the goals and strategies into actual laws, is the development code. New development and redevelopment will be orderly, carefully planned, and predictable. The character of existing residential areas, as well as successful commercial and industrial areas, expansive rural landscapes, and sensitive ecological areas will be preserved. And that will be done through locating manufacturing and logistics areas at appropriate distances from residential neighborhoods and conservation areas and sensitive areas. There's a strategy in here to protect and preserve the parish's historic buildings, landscapes, and waterways. Goal number 4, developing land and buildings in ways that lower risk and incidents of flooding and flood damages caused by rainfall and storm surge. The policy in here is to essentially require any development permitted in the parish's area of special flood hazard as low impact, which means it manages the water that falls on that property on site and close to the source of where the rainwater falls, rather than building in such a way that simply moves the water as quickly as possible off your property into either your neighbor's area or the public right-of-way, or into facilities outside of the property. Number 5, adequate infrastructure and utilities will be available in areas permitted for new development. And again, in here, major policy is that the parish's decision makers, including yourselves, the Zoning Commission, Board of Zoning Adjustments, and Parish Council, should consider the impact of proposed changes to existing land use regulation, such as a zoning change, on traffic and drainage in adjacent areas. We learned through consultation with staff that it wasn't always clear that commissioners have that ability to consider that. And so best practice is that should be considered, and we're putting it front and center here. The future land use map is probably the most useful tool coming out of this plan. I think that the Planning Commission staff will likely rely on to inform staff reports and decisions. The future land use map is not intended to replace zoning. It's supposed to be a much higher level strategy or roadmap for growth in the parish. It's organized into a number of different categories of land use that I'm going to describe shortly. But essentially what it is it establishes where different uses ought to take place at various intensities. Again, we're talking about a much higher larger grain than zoning does. But the policies under the second goal of ensuring that new development and redevelopment is orderly, carefully planned, and predictable, is that the future land use map within the comp plan shall guide the assignment of zoning classifications throughout the parish. And so if there is a question of changing zoning of a certain property, look to the future land use map to see what category is there and look at whether or not the proposed zoning category would be consistent with that. Policy 2, the development code and subdivision ordinances shall be updated continuously to reflect updated comprehensive plan goals, policies, and strategies. These aren't policies that shouldn't necessarily be updated once every 10 years or even every 5 years, but on an almost, not annual basis, but they should be evolving and essentially living documents. Parish staff, in policy number 3, parish staff and decision makers shall reference the future land use map when considering changes to zoning designations, budgeting for capital improvements, and adoption of future plans and policies impacting land use in the parish. So unlike a zoning code, which, I can barely understand looking at a zoning map, what is permitted, never mind the everyday person should be able to pick up the future land use map and the comp plan and understand what the parish's vision is for their neighborhood, for a place they want to open a business down the street. A developer, outside investor can look at this map and understand simply from here, what is the way that the parish is intended to grow. There are 11 categories in the future land use map. I'm going to go through 3 or 4 at a time, starting with the least intense categories. On the very far left is the lowest intensity. Protected category, protected conservation, or the ecologically sensitive lands that have a formal protection already on them. And so we're talking about national wildlife reserves, mitigation banks, state parks. These are already areas that are hands-off for new intense development or private development. Coastal conservation, if you recall that coastal flooding projection, this flood risk right here, basically all the area in here that's not already developed, but that is expected to flood significantly in a 1 in 100-year storm over the next 20 years. Coastal storm is treating those as what we're calling coastal conservation. The coastal zone is everywhere south of I-12 and I-10 in St. Tammany Parish. And so looking at all those areas which are not already developed to a high level of intensity and basically stating that these areas shouldn't be developed with anything terribly intense, whether it's commercial, residential, or otherwise. The rural and agricultural category applies to similar lands but north of I-12, and so these are areas where any kind of residential would be on minimum 3-acre lots, and then uses such as agriculture, horse farms, timberlands, ranches are the predominant uses. Parks and open space are another category in here. There are a number of different established formal parks and recreation areas, publicly owned, that are designated as parks and open space. We have 3 residential categories and divided into different intensities. Low intensity are areas where are the countryside, essentially. Minimum 1-acre lots. These aren't areas where you're likely to have centralized sewer necessarily. You're more likely to find septic systems in these areas. They're more likely to be located far away from high-capacity transportation and other infrastructure. Next is medium intensity. These are maximum 1-acre lots, so typically about 1 to 8 units per acre. These are traditional suburban residential neighborhoods. Centralized water and sewer become a bit more practical in these areas, as do infrastructure like sidewalks or subsurface drainage and street lighting. High intensity residential neighborhoods include predominantly attached homes like townhomes or duplexes, multifamily developments, typically over 8 units per acre, but can also include things like very small lots, mobile homes as well. All right, and then for higher intensity categories, mixed use is either residential or commercial or a mixture thereof, which allows a more compact style of development, which can create more complete communities in which you can actually walk or ride a bike to different destinations, more compact development patterns. The Tarabella subdivision is an example of that. Institutional are your hospitals, your healthcare facilities, large education facilities, large fire and police stations. Commercial includes concentrations of offices, retailers, employers, typically more intense than we might find in a residential neighborhood. The residential designations don't exclude neighborhood serving commercial. So if you have a, dentist's office or coffee shop or daycare, those aren't to say those are excluded from the residential. But things like a gas station, a Walmart, those more intense commercial uses you associate with, 190 or something like that, is what the commercial category is for. And then finally, manufacturing and logistics. And so these are some of our large employers, our Folgers, our Associated Wholesale Grocers. These manufacturing and logistics employers need a lot of space. And so we sought to find large areas of the parish that are adjacent to major infrastructure, but not too close to residential areas in order to locate those types of uses in the future. So here's just a snapshot of one part of the parish. This is Lacombe right here, and you can see this protected area, this dark green here, is Fountainbleau and Big Branch along Lake Pontchartrain. The dark blue area is currently very low intensity developed area that's within that floodplain. You can see this blue area follows the lines of the bayou and the 100-year floodplain quite closely. And outside of those floodplain lines are where we look at the transportation network to determine where to locate intense uses such as commercial. This is right along 190, designated as commercial. The surrounding residential area outside of the conservation zone is a medium intensity residential. And you can see in the center of Lacombe here, there's a number of other institutional uses. The mixed use designation is along this major corridor right here leading to I-12, which is currently not highly developed. We wanted to maintain some flexibility for the type of use on there, hence the mixed use designation. This light yellow color is the low intensity residential. So you can see farther toward the east, the predominant use or category. I said I wasn't going to read all of these to you, and I do want to leave time for a good number of questions. So I'll trust that you've got access to all of the transportation, living with nature, people and communities, business and economies, goals and strategies. I'm going to leave you all my business cards, so if anyone has a specific question that is not answered tonight, you can still reach me easily. I do want to end with just showing an example of the implementation table that's at the back of the plan. This is essentially the 5-year action plan. Ross talked about updating the plan about 5 years, or at least doing some kind of check-in or progress report on where you are. And so we'd recommend that in 5 years, revisiting this table and seeing how far and how much progress was made in terms of implementing the plan. But again, up front here, I'll just read off the first one here because it's the most important one. Facilitating the process to update the development code through collaboration with key stakeholders, including updating zoning districts to classify uses, reducing the total number of zoning districts or classification categories, and updating impervious cover requirements for new development. References responsible entities, funding sources, as well as the strategies that are relevant within the comp plan. All right, just an update on the comments we've received. Since launching the plan on January 26th, or we actually did on January 27th, we've had over 2,600 visitors to the website, which surprised me, actually. That was a lot more than I was expecting. We've had over 700 of those individuals visit the future land use map page, which is a link you have to click on when you pull up the homepage, which is this screen on the right. We've received a total of 89 comments, including 10 from the meeting in January, 39 submitted through the website, 6 emails, and 34 pins that people dropped on this draft future land use map where they can provide direct comments that are publicly visible. Any of y'all can visit this map and see what people are commenting on. 5 main themes so far. I'm not going to read any comments out loud, but we've included a couple of exemplary or kind of example comments that we've received. Generally fall into 5 categories. We've received comments on the future land use map being updated to reflect either what a site needs, or maybe there's a sensitive area that was missed in some some way in the designations, or to better reflect what the existing zoning is. We received a number of comments like that, where someone might have land that's zoned commercial, but it's shown as low-intensity residential on there, and so we want to make sure that we're not creating, unnecessary conflicts in implementation there. Number two, the plan should clearly reference, connect, or coordinate with infrastructure planning for roads and traffic mitigation, and that theme was repeated again for coordinating planning with drainage, water and sewer, and flooding mitigation, as well as for rights-of-way improvements, traffic lights, street lights, sidewalks. Just a lot of emphasis on infrastructure enhancements in the comments so far. And there were some questions about how the planning process worked, what opportunities are there for future engagement, and how will implementation happen, and how can it be held accountable for implementation. So we recognize that land use must be planned in coordination with infrastructure, and that the parish is undertaking a number of parish-wide infrastructure studies and plans. And so even though it's a 20-year plan, it's not to say that it shouldn't change for 20 years. The plan should be updated continuously along with findings that come out of those studies. And so we may find, for example, that there are parts of the parish that are outside of the FEMA-recognized 100-year floodplain, but are still extremely flood vulnerable. And so the parish-wide drainage study may point to that and may suggest areas where you update the future land use map to accommodate that. The 60-day comment period continues. We're accepting comments through the website, as I mentioned, as well as at each of these 5 different libraries. A paper copy is available along with the future land use map. The planning department next door has a copy at its front desk, and we are accepting comments through April 1st. We'll be back in early April to present the final version of the plan with an explanation of how it's changed and why it changed based on the comments that were received. And then after that introduction, the plan is for consideration for adoption in May, and then consideration by Parish Council, adoption by resolution after May. That's what I have for you tonight. I'm going to leave you these, I'm going to pass down these business cards. Okay, great. I have more in case they run out. Yeah. What time is it? 5:45. And my contact info is also on your screens.
Again, you have a comment?
Yes. Evening.
When I look at what we've done here so far and the kind of the maps of the development, it looks like we're continuing to say we need medium intensity, more residential development in the areas that are already have infrastructure problems. So the problem, it seems to be, is we tend to build without the infrastructure going in, and I don't really see where that's changing in this plan. So my point kind of being is, you would almost argue that you'd be better to build in other parts of the parish where you plan it out better and quit building in the areas that are already overloaded.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, we keep running into, there's so many subdivisions in the way now, you can't put roads in, or there's a river in the way, but the development keeps going on in the same places. And yet if you look at the maps, the whole northern part of the parish is looked at as just nothing, okay?
Correct.
And so we tend to be, seems to me, I call it the urban growth boundary line that they had in the 2025 plan.
Yep.
We seem to develop in an urban way without urban infrastructure.
Right.
And I don't know that as long as you're doing subdivisions without grid layout, that you're ever going to change what we have, because we have a few major roads that all belong to the state, and we're relying on them to do anything about them. I just don't, it's hard for me to grasp that this is going to look any different, only bigger than we've already got.
Yeah, and so that's actually a really interesting point that we addressed with a lot of folks actually during the growth workshops last summer. And the plan includes a couple of pages on the different growth scenarios that were presented. And the 3 scenarios kind of revolve around three different ways of growing. One, which is to kind of spread out and, like you mentioned, put more development in the northern part of the parish, the central part of the parish, farther away from where all the activity is right now. Another scenario was, instead of allowing that, concentrate more growth where you've already got some development, some urbanization, as you mentioned, but it's not entirely built out. The infrastructure isn't built out there yet. They're sort of incomplete communities because they've got some assets, they've got very high-quality residential subdivision perhaps, but as soon as they leave that, they may experience a roadway that's congested with no sidewalks and poor drainage on it. So we describe those two different scenarios, and we also describe it in terms of the infrastructure dollars that are available to improve existing problems, with the idea that if you spread out your population over a wide area and you locate new dense subdivisions farther away from existing activity centers, farther away from where these kind of incomplete neighborhoods have already started to develop, you're creating additional infrastructure costs to serve those farther flung areas, the roadway transportation, the public safety resources, educational resources. And so that's been the trend over the last really for many, many decades. There hasn't been a concentrated approach to saying that we're going to double down on infrastructure in this area. And so we present them the trade-off as, okay, would you rather have more neighbors with more infrastructure spent, more infrastructure investments made in your area, or would you rather have less neighbors farther away that might develop area that's, currently undeveloped, an agricultural area, but it's going to have to require some infrastructure dollars to support it. So when faced with that decision, people, light bulbs started going off and saying, well, okay, well, if it means that we can have, that roadway widening or that subsurface drainage installed or those street lights improved, maybe that's worth having more neighbors for, as opposed to spreading more wide and thin and having less depth of investment. Then, how that plays out over the future land use map is the million-dollar question, though. And so if there are specific areas you're concerned that we're showing over.
If you look at the western part of the parish in
Yeah.
particular, there's showed a high percentage rate of growth.
Mm-hmm.
But when you show percent, it really doesn't tell you the growth. You can have 100% growth and go from one person to two. So,
Okay.
that when they don't have the numbers there to go with it, it's hard for me to analyze what the data really tells me sometimes. But you go over there and we've got all these new subdivisions that are feeding into 22, into 1085, and if we don't have east-west roads and north-south roads in the plan before we build all these subdivisions, well, before you know it, all the subdivisions are there and there's no place to put a road anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't seem to be, the stuff that comes before us, there doesn't ever seem to be any new roads going in.
Mm-hmm.
And we're still building subdivisions, and every time we build a new one, we block a potential path
Yep.
for either drainage or roadways or both.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we haven't clearly outlined those things and say, there's gonna be a road here, then it's, when somebody comes and says, I wanna put an A4 development, and I'm thinking, so where's everybody gonna go? Because we already can't move in places. I just don't get that warm fuzzy feeling that we've been that detailed in this. Maybe I just don't understand the plan good enough yet.
Yeah.
Y'all want to continue that?
Yeah,
Conversation?
I'll let you go. I don't.
No, I think
don't
it's,
just-
I'm sure there's other people in the queue and.
Yeah, let somebody else.
Commissioner McInnes.
Sure, I can echo that. I know from 2025, the map is it. The map's the roadmap. You could have all the nice text that says we're going to improve the infrastructure before we build in these yellow areas here. But when it comes down to us voting, the staff report, we look at the map, and the map says that we can do it, and ta-da. We don't look at the fine print. So I echo Commissioner Ress's concern. I wanted to just, I have a lot of comments, and I would like to meet with you later and
Great.
go over them. But just for tonight, I wanted to ask a couple of things. One is, did you guys look at other models for parishes or counties in similar situations where we're growing faster than our infrastructure and environment really is dealing with?
Yep.
And because it seems kind of similar to 2025, just tweaked and upgraded. But I'm sure you guys, with your, I mean, this is your profession, you probably did look at
Yeah.
some other things.
Yeah, no, actually, we took a very, I'd say a very kind of, I wouldn't say it's unprecedented in Louisiana, but it is, I think, a very concerted approach, or it's an approach with a very concerted effort on respecting the threat of water. Because we heard that over and over again from folks about riverine flooding as well as flash flooding and coastal flooding. And so that's why you see categories such as this coastal conservation area. It's why you see designations of these protected areas and mitigation banks in the Pearl River area. And so, we took, verbatim the line work from the 100-year floodplain and imposed it on the entire southern part of the parish, south of I-12. And so that was probably one of the largest driving factors for the way that the southern part of the parish looks like the way it does in this future land use map. And so that approach, I would say, is, I think, a bit distinguished from other comp plans you may have seen. When it comes to organizing subdivision development in a more grid-like pattern, the future land use map doesn't really dictate, how the roads are laid out in a subdivision. Those are, regulated in the subdivision regulations as well as the development code, and so that's why those kind of recommendations are in the text rather than on the future land use map itself. Yeah, I'd love to sit down with you and address those questions.
One thing I wanted to say regarding residential is I would like to see more categories than low, medium, high, because for me, the medium, allowing 1 to 8 units per acre, that's a huge span. That's a huge difference. And I can tell you what's going to come before us is everybody's going to want the 8 units per acre. They're not going to come to us for the 1. And so, to me, that we're not given enough choices here. And I just feel like we need 1 or 2 more categories.
Yeah, so actually, the reason why we actually started with just 2 residential categories, and the reason is to give this body more decision-making authority and more flexibility. Because
it doesn't work that way. I know it.
Yeah, it's.
I know it's not zoning, but in reality, the pressure is put upon us that says the land use map says it's appropriate. And so when you have a range, it's hard to say no. The lower range is allowed to, it's.
That's why you have staff, who's your professional.
Yeah.
Doing the research and analysis for you in advance of the meetings, giving you that research, allowing you to review and contact us, ask questions. But I think on the planning side.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to hear what the other commissioners think, because I think it really boxes us in and doesn't give us that flexibility. It does the opposite. So.
Anything else?
One
Anything else,
last
Ryan?
thing is I'd like to see more mixed use within this plan. You know, for example, I live in the Goodby area where 190 and a state highway intersect. And that, to me, should be a town center. It should be a hub. It shouldn't just be residential and a little commercial. And I know 2025 had areas scattered through the parish that were identified as good hubs for small area plans, they called it back then, but I think that would help our traffic problems if we had more of these, so.
Great approach is to ask, and identify areas that might need some area.
Exactly.
Say, look, this area might, we have 3241. It's a new road coming in from I-12 to Bush, and we have identified that as a corridor that needs additional study.
This one right here.
So while the land use plan, like Matt said, is very broad for the entire parish, if there are areas identified by this commission that says, we need to look at this area a little bit more, then we can identify that in the implementation table and say this should be used, just to be the implementation area.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you, y'all. I can tell you have done a lot of work.
Thanks. No, and we'll definitely set up that time.
Commissioner Crawford.
Okay, I'll be brief. Matt, can you just help me understand a little bit about the three scenarios?
Yes.
And will one of those be picked, or all three in this plan?
The three scenarios are a bit abstracted. There's only 5 categories on there. They are divided into, the first one is business as usual. So if we don't change zoning at all, really, what's the parish going to look like in 20 years?
Okay.
If you take the restrictions off altogether, it's called, I think it was called Room to Grow, or I think was the name of that one.
Concentrate and conserve?
And the
or
concentrate and
space to
conserve was
spread?
space to spread is the third one.
Okay.
Which is essentially taking the restrictions off density all across the parish and letting high density development happen over there, kind of wherever developers and landowners decide to do it. And the third scenario was concentrate and conserve, which is the scenario I mentioned earlier, is that being more strategic about where you allow higher intensity development to happen, locating it outside of the floodplain and locating it closer to current activity centers, places where people work, go to school, go shopping, go to church, and so forth, with the idea that if you shorten the distance these people who are new to the parish have to travel between their home and those destinations, you're going to lower the impact on transportation infrastructure, less congestion,
So-
shorter trips.
So looking at those three, how did you use them? How did you apply them?
Yeah. So they were designed to create conversation, right? Because the concentrate and conserve one basically said the entire 100-year floodplain was going to be a no development zone, which we're not going to be able to do practically, right? But the idea of it created this conversation. And we asked people to register their support for one of the 3 scenarios so we could get an idea of where people landed. Most people chose the concentrate and conserve scenario, but we still wanted to listen to people who chose the other scenarios. Some people really were concerned about just not wanting a lot of regulation or a lot of rules about what they do with the land. And so they liked the, space to spread one.
Okay, so these 3 were part of the input to the plan.
Yeah.
It's not that you picked one and the plan is based on that.
Right. It's not a
Okay.
popularity contest. They're all kind of, they were done for the purposes of facilitating this workshop and having these conversations with folks. We had about 140 people come to those workshops, so.
Okay.
Got pretty well.
Can you pull up that flood map that you had real quick that showed, basically
Yeah.
showed a lot of flooding below I-12, I think?
Yep. This is the state
Right.
Coastal Protection Restoration Authority's flood projections.
Okay. But basically, if you look at that, it says anything with color on it gets water and everything that doesn't is good to go, basically.
Well, in a coastal storm. It doesn't cover, this projection doesn't cover rain
Okay,
events.
so this is flood from water
Coastal
rise.
flooding, yeah.
Coastal flooding, okay.
From
Okay.
storm surge.
Good, so it's misleading, okay. As far as all of the flooding goes, because we know we have a lot of rain-induced
have-
flooding.
Yeah, and the parish is currently conducting a parish-wide drainage study to really understand where are those areas that are more susceptible to rainfall inundation.
Okay. It's starting to make sense to me now, and the land use map, I'm beginning to see my way through it, so
Okay.
I think that's good piece of work to get us started.
Great.
That was it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I don't have anyone else in the queue. Matt and Ross, we've got some folks that came in and we're out of time for this special meeting. Would y'all state again, just in case people missed it, of how they can comment on this plan?
The public comment period remains open through April 1st. newdirections2040.com. Anyone can access the plan text and the map itself and leave comments on the map. They can also submit comments through the website. There are 5 locations in the parish library system where we have the plan on hand for people to view in person if they don't want to use the website. Slidell, Lacombe, Madisonville, Covington, and Folsom, as well as at the Parish Planning Department office in Building B next door.
Okay,
So,
all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
For coming tonight, and
yep.
I'll accept the motion to adjourn this meeting. So moved. Motion to adjourn the special meeting for the New Directions 2040. Thank y'all for coming. If, we'll get the other one started here in just a moment. Oh, you mean